In a normal market, the Toyota Land Cruiser 70 should not have stood a chance. A vehicle from the 1980s with a simple design, minimal comfort, and a price comparable to two base BMW X3s. Yet, it is still alive, and people are still buying it. Today, we'll look at how the 70 series managed to outlive dozens of more modern competitors, and why buyers are still willing to pay that kind of money for its reliability and durability. It would be wrong to say that the Land Cruiser 70 was never meant to be a long-term project. Its predecessor, the Land Cruiser 40 series, remained in production for 24 years, from 1960 to 1984. And if we include the Brazilian Toyota Bandeirante, which was built until 2001, it becomes clear that any replacement was expected to have a long life from the very beginning. The 70 series is considered the successor to the 40 series, not by generation number, but by purpose. Toyota did not develop the Land Cruiser along a single line. Instead, it evolved through several parallel branches. The Land Cruiser 40 was essentially a workhorse. It offered minimal comfort and maximum functionality. It was a tool for hard work, not a family vehicle. The 50 series, introduced in 1967, did not replace the 40. It was developed alongside it. It was more comfortable and featured a four-door wagon body, but it never became truly mainstream. Even Toyota itself treated it largely as an experiment. The 60 series, launched in 1980, reflected a different philosophy. It was a family SUV with a much higher level of comfort. It retained serious off-road capability, but it also became more expensive and moved into a new market segment, one that farmers, geologists, and government agencies rarely entered. When the 70 series appeared in 1984, it became the direct functional successor to the 40 series. It was designed as a truly utilitarian vehicle, built for harsh conditions, poor roads, and imperfect maintenance. In many ways, it was the same Land Cruiser 40, just more modern, safer, and more powerful. From the very beginning, the 70 series was offered in a wide range of body styles: short, medium, and long wheelbase versions, open and closed bodies, wagons and pickups, soft tops, and hard tops. And in 1985, a more passenger-oriented version appeared, aimed at buyers who wanted both utility and a bit more comfort. After the 1990 facelift, this version received the Prado name. Over time, it evolved into a fully independent model, the Land Cruiser Prado. In the mid-1980s, the base engine in the lineup was the 4-liter carbureted 3F gasoline unit, producing 135 horsepower and 280 newton-meters of torque. A naturally aspirated 4-liter diesel was mainly chosen in African and Australian markets. With no electronics and no turbocharger, this engine delivered almost tractor-like low-end torque, along with exceptional durability and easy repairability by modern standards. Toward the end of the 1980s, a turbocharged diesel version appeared. However, it was mostly sold in wealthier markets and played only a secondary role in the lineup. All engines were paired with 5-speed manual transmissions. An automatic gearbox was available only in North America, and even there, 2-pedal versions of the 70 series were extremely rare. The model featured permanent 4-wheel drive with a manually lockable front axle. Toyota deliberately focused on durability rather than advanced technology. For example, in the gasoline engines, the valve timing system used gears instead of a belt or chain. This significantly extended engine life and reduced the number of wear components. The diesel engines used heavy-duty double-row timing chains with a service life of around 400,000 kilometers. Overall, the 70 series did not exhaust its owners with constant breakdowns or excessive maintenance. It was designed to tolerate abuse and forgive neglect. Mileage figures of 1 million kilometers or more without a major overhaul were not unusual, and even 500,000 kilometers was often seen as nothing special. For a Land Cruiser 70, that was still considered young. By the late 1990s, the 70 series was still being sold as a full-fledged Land Cruiser in most parts of the world. However, in 1999, its global career effectively came to an end. The model was withdrawn from sale in North America, Europe, and even in its home market of Japan. Several factors came together at that moment. First, passive safety regulations became much stricter. Airbags and crumple zones became mandatory. The body-on-frame utilitarian construction of the 70 series simply did not fit these requirements without major and expensive redesign. Second, emissions standards were tightened. The diesel engines of the 70 series struggled to meet the new regulations. In theory, they could have been upgraded, but this would have required separate certification in each country. In the end, Toyota decided that the effort was not worth the cost, especially since by that time, the 80 and 100 series had firmly established themselves on the market. They were more expensive, but they steadily took customers away from the 70s. More and more buyers were no longer willing to accept leaf springs, minimal electronics, and a Spartan interior. At the same time, Toyota did not discontinue the 70 series. There were still many regions where this kind of vehicle was in demand, and where safety and emissions standards were either much more relaxed or did not exist at all. These included the Middle East, Africa, Asia, and even relatively prosperous Australia. In fact, in the same year, 1999, the model received several updates aimed at improving comfort without sacrificing durability or off-road capability. The front leaf springs were replaced with coil springs, the wheelbase was extended, and the interior was lightly refreshed. At this point, a reasonable question might come up. Why did Toyota continue producing such an old model when it already had newer and more modern vehicles that could have been simplified and sold in the same markets, Africa and the Middle East? First, by that time, the reputation of the 70 series was so strong that Toyota had a huge number of orders and long-term supply contracts. The vehicle required no advertising, no presentations, and no marketing campaigns. It essentially sold itself. And since the platform had long been paid off, the model remained highly profitable for the company. Second, simplified versions of newer Land Cruisers did exist, the 105 series, for example. But even in that form, it was still expensive. Maintenance costs were noticeably higher, as was overall cost of ownership. In addition, for many regions, the 105 series was simply too large, too complex, and excessive for real-world needs. As a result, both private owners and corporate clients, mining companies, farmers, oil and gas operators, geologists, and many others, consistently chose the LC70 over the 105 series. Over time, a simple idea became firmly established. The Land Cruiser 70 is not just an old vehicle that Toyota forgot to discontinue. It is a professional tool that is deliberately kept unchanged. At the same time, the 70 series was left with very few competitors. Its long-standing rival, the Nissan Patrol, discontinued its utilitarian version in 1997. The new generation became larger, more expensive, and more complex, turning into a competitor for the 100 series, but no longer for the 70. The Land Rover Defender occupied the same niche and price range, but with all due respect to British viewers, the long-term reliability and durability of Toyota and Land Rover were very different, not in Land Rover's favor. Mitsubishi Pajero also stopped being a direct competitor over time, moving into the segment of more comfortable, urban-oriented SUVs, even though it retained some off-road capability. There were other players as well, Isuzu and a few others. But in the end, the Land Cruiser 70 effectively became a monopolist in its niche. Another major update came in 2007. Visually, the Land Cruiser changed quite noticeably. And yes, Toyota is often criticized for its design, sometimes with good reason. But in the case of the 70 series refresh, the result was surprisingly successful. Somehow, a vehicle that was already nearly 25 years old managed to look fresher without losing its character or becoming overstyled. There were also significant technical updates. A new turbocharged V8 diesel received electronic fuel injection, and the throttle pedal became electronic. ABS, air conditioning, power windows, and central locking became standard on all versions, even the most basic ones. A new instrument cluster was introduced, along with a driver airbag, while a passenger airbag became available as an option. At first glance, it might seem that the Land Cruiser had finally shifted away from its utilitarian roots toward urban comfort. But that would be a misunderstanding. In 2007, modern equipment did not mean infotainment systems or driver assistance technologies. It meant the bare minimum required to legally sell the vehicle, nothing more. A separate chapter in the history of the 70 series deserves special attention: the pickup versions and the phenomenon known as the Toyota War. Toyota Motor Corporation has repeatedly been accused of the fact that its pickups, especially the Land Cruiser 70 and the Hilux, are widely used in armed conflicts in Africa and the Middle East. There has never been any evidence that Toyota deliberately produces vehicles for warfare. Most accusations were based either on emotional media reports or on indirect observations. The term Toyota War was first used in 1987, after the conflict between Libya and Chad. During that war, fighters on both sides actively used Toyota pickups equipped with various weapons mounted in the cargo bed. In desert conditions, these vehicles proved to be unexpectedly effective, sometimes even more so than traditional armored vehicles. After that, Toyota pickups became strongly associated with the image of a poor man's military vehicle: simple, affordable, and reliable transportation for conflicts in Africa and the Middle East. At that time, however, the company itself was not directly blamed. The situation changed in the 2000s and 10s during a series of conflicts in several Arab countries. Journalists increasingly documented hundreds of nearly new Toyota pickups in the hands of armed groups. This led to investigations by US and EU authorities, who examined whether Toyota had violated international sanctions by supplying vehicles to militant organizations. The investigations revealed semi-legal resale schemes, but without direct involvement from Toyota. The vehicles were officially purchased through legal channels and then transferred to armed groups through gray market networks. Legally, Toyota was cleared of wrongdoing. However, public criticism did not disappear. It was difficult to believe that the company was completely unaware of such practices. At the same time, fully stopping these schemes would have meant abandoning entire regional markets, and that would have meant losing billions of dollars. Until 2009, the 70 series was produced at 3 different plants in Japan, Portugal, and Venezuela. And it was Venezuela that became the setting for an almost ironic episode. At the time, Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez declared that, in line with the country's political course, Toyota was expected to share its technologies with local companies. Otherwise, the factory could be expropriated by the state. Toyota was not prepared for this kind of partnership and chose to shut down production in Venezuela instead. In 2015, production also came to an end in Japan. New regulations came into force, requiring all vehicles produced after June 2015 to be equipped with electronic stability control. From an economic standpoint, integrating this system into the Land Cruiser 70 did not make sense. As a result, Toyota announced a farewell limited edition in 2014, the 30th anniversary series, offered as a wagon and a 4-door pickup. It seemed that this marked the end of the 70 series in its home market. But that was not the end of the story. In 2023, the model received another update, was brought into compliance with modern regulations, and production in Japan was resumed. The most visible change, though far from the most important, was the exterior. Toyota attempted to add a touch of modernity, introducing contemporary daytime running lights. The 70 series was still instantly recognizable, but for the first time, its design began to receive criticism. Some traditionalists did not appreciate the updated look. Overall, however, the new old Land Cruiser was received fairly well. And as mentioned earlier, styling has never been the main priority here. More important were the mechanical updates. The 70 series received a new 2.8-liter turbo diesel from the Prado, along with a 6-speed automatic transmission. This improved fuel efficiency, reduced noise levels, and made everyday driving noticeably more comfortable compared to the old manual gearbox. The interior was updated as well. A small infotainment screen appeared, additional safety systems were introduced, and overall ride quality improved. But it is important to understand that there was no dramatic revolution. These updates were evolutionary rather than transformative. Even with all these improvements, the Land Cruiser 70 remained a tough, utilitarian vehicle with only modest comfort, while continuing to be exceptionally reliable and easy to maintain. Today, its main markets include Australia, where it still complies with local regulations, the United Arab Emirates, Morocco, and several other African countries. Determining the exact price of a 70 series is not simple. The model is offered in numerous configurations, and many base versions are sold as chassis cab units for specialized bodies. In general, prices range roughly from $45,000 to $95,000 US for 2025 and 2026 model year vehicles. For example, in my country, I found a brand new 70 series listed at $87,000 and a nearly new one with about 4,000 kilometers on the odometer priced at $76,000. Used examples are not significantly cheaper. As mentioned at the beginning of the video, however, the Land Cruiser 70 is officially unavailable in the EU and the United States, as it does not meet current safety and emissions standards. And yet, it is hard not to think that demand for it in those markets would be very strong. In the end, it is fair to say that the Land Cruiser 70 is a truly unique vehicle in today's automotive world. In an era of massive dashboard screens, in a world where most crossovers and SUVs look increasingly alike, and where durability and longevity are often pushed aside in favor of features and marketing, the 70 series feels like a breath of fresh air. No one knows how long this Land Cruiser will remain in production. But with environmental regulations becoming stricter every year, it is unlikely to last forever. And when it finally disappears, an entire era will go with it. An era of truly durable, resilient, and honest vehicles. But for now, it is still here, and that is something to be grateful for.